A shocking scene unfolds aboard Skyline Airways Flight 237. Vanessa Parker, a senior flight attendant, publicly humiliates and slaps Zara Washington, mistaking her for an economy passenger who snuck into first class. The other passengers gasp in horror as Zara's cheek reddens from the impact. "Security will escort you off this plane," Vanessa sneers. Little does she know that the woman she just assaulted owns the entire airline and has been conducting an undercover assessment of passenger experience. Zara's eyes narrow as she makes a decision that will change everything. Before we continue this shocking story of racial discrimination in the skies, let me know where you're watching from. If you believe in justice and standing up against racism, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more powerful stories of resilience against prejudice. Will Zara reveal her true identity right away, or is she planning something much bigger? Stay with Zara Washington had built Skyline Airways from nothing into a billion-dollar company over 15 years through sheer brilliance and determination. But she deliberately kept her ownership secret, operating through holding companies and proxies, to avoid the spotlight that had burned her before. Only Richard Coleman, her trusted COO and longtime friend, knew her true identity as the force behind the airline's meteoric rise. The arrangement worked perfectly until passenger satisfaction reports began showing troubling patterns that the management team couldn't explain away. Complaints from black passengers were being dismissed as exaggerations, while white customers received immediate attention and compensation. When Richard presented the latest statistics showing clear racial disparities in customer service quality, Zara made a decision that many billionaires might find beneath them. She would experience her own airline as a regular customer. No special treatment, no executive access, just a standard ticket and the true Skyline Airways experience. This undercover journey had already taken her on 2 previous flights, where she witnessed subtle discrimination, first-hand subtleties that would never make it into a complaint form, but nonetheless created a hostile environment for passengers of color. The slap on Flight 237 was merely the culmination of building tension she had observed. As Vanessa Parker's hand struck her face, Zara felt a familiar sting that went beyond physical pain. It was the same dismissal she had encountered throughout her career, from being mistaken for a secretary in her first executive role, to having white subordinates question her qualifications, despite her Harvard Business School credentials. Rather than exposing herself right there, Zara made the calculated decision to document everything. If this was happening to her, the wealthiest woman on the aircraft, what were other black passengers experiencing? Vanessa continued her tirade, as she forced Zara to gather her belongings. "Economy is that way," she hissed, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, but quiet enough to maintain deniability. "People like you always trying to get something for nothing." As Zara was escorted to the back of the plane, she noticed how Vanessa's demeanor instantly transformed when addressing the white businessman in the next row. All smiles and "sir this" and "sir that," offering him a complimentary drink for any disturbance. The contrast was stark and deliberate. In economy, Zara quietly documented every interaction on her phone, noting how flight attendants skipped black passengers during service or responded to their requests with visible annoyance. One young black mother was ignored for 20 minutes, while asking for water for her child's medication. When they finally landed in Chicago, Zara expected to simply deplane and contact Richard with her findings. Instead, Vanessa approached her with 2 airport security officers. "This passenger has been disruptive throughout the flight," she claimed, the lie flowing effortlessly from her lips. She refused to stay in her assigned seat and became confrontational when redirected. Zara remained calm, reaching for her identification. "There seems to be a misunderstanding if you check my ID," but before she could finish, Vanessa cut her off. "She's claiming to be someone important now," she mocked with an exaggerated eye roll. The security officer, a stocky man with a crew cut who later identified himself as Derek Parker, took her ID and studied it with exaggerated skepticism. "Zara Washington? The Zara Washington?" His tone dripped with sarcasm as he exchanged knowing glances with Vanessa. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come with me. Using fake identification is a serious offense." As Derek led her away, Zara noticed the uncomfortable similarity in his features to Vanessa's. The family resemblance was unmistakable, and her suspicions were confirmed when he muttered into his radio requesting Officer Parker as backup. A family affair, it seemed. The trap was closing around her, orchestrated by people who had no idea who they were really dealing with, or what consequences their actions would soon bring down upon themselves. The detention room at O'Hare International Airport was deliberately intimidating, small, windowless, with harsh fluorescent lighting that buzzed incessantly overhead. Zara sat in an uncomfortable metal chair as Derek Parker paced around her like a predator sizing up its prey. "Let's go through this again," he said, slamming her confiscated phone and ID onto the table. "You expect me to believe that you, a black woman in economy class, own Skyline Airways?" The contempt in his voice was unmistakable. Zara maintained her composure despite the blatant racism. "I was in first class until your sister forcibly removed me. And yes, I am the majority shareholder and founder of Skyline Airways, operating through Washington Holdings. One call to Richard Coleman, the COO, will confirm my identity." Derek laughed, the sound devoid of any actual humor. "Right. And I'm the King of England. Do you know how many nut jobs we get claiming to own airlines, be famous celebrities, or royalty? The fact that you're sticking to this ridiculous story just makes you look more delusional." He leaned in uncomfortably close. "Or maybe you're running some kind of scam." The irony wasn't lost on Zara. Throughout her career, she had deliberately maintained a low profile, a decision born from bitter experience. 10 years earlier, as the newly appointed VP of Operations at Continental Express, she had faced such vicious racism from colleagues and subordinates that her effectiveness was compromised. White employees would accidentally exclude her from critical meetings, claim they never received her emails, or openly question her directives. The final straw came when a white male colleague with half her qualifications was promoted above her, and the CEO casually explained that clients feel more comfortable with certain types of people. When she built Skyline Airways from the ground up with her software fortune, Zara vowed never to let her race or gender become a liability again. She created a complex ownership structure with Richard as the public face, while she made all major decisions behind the scenes. Now that very anonymity that had protected her business interests was being weaponized against her. Hours passed with no water, no bathroom breaks, and no communication allowed. Derek would leave periodically, and through the thin walls, Zara could hear fragments of his phone conversations. "Yeah, sis," she's still insisting. "Crazy as hell. Thinks she owns the place. We'll teach her a lesson about respecting authority." When Zara demanded her constitutional rights to an attorney, Derek's face darkened. "You're not under arrest yet. You're being detained for questioning regarding potential security threats. Keep pushing, and I'll add resisting authority to whatever charges we end up filing." By the 6th hour, Richard Coleman had grown concerned when Zara missed their scheduled check-in. His calls to her cell went straight to voicemail. Using his executive access, he began checking passenger manifests and airport security logs. Meanwhile, Derek finally granted Zara her one courtesy call. She immediately dialed Richard, speaking quickly to explain her situation. "Richard, it's Zara. I'm being detained at O'Hare after Flight 237. The head of security here is..." Derek snatched the phone, quickly ending the call. "Time's up," he growled. "Your friend can call back during business hours." What Zara didn't know was that Derek was already building a case against her. In a back office, he was falsifying a report claiming she had been violent and intoxicated on the flight, had assaulted his sister, and had resisted security personnel. More disturbing still, a young IT technician was being pressured to clean up the security footage from the flight, erasing any evidence of Vanessa's assault, while preserving only the moments where Zara appeared agitated in response. Just when Zara thought the situation couldn't possibly deteriorate further, Derek returned with 2 Chicago police officers. "Ms. Washington," he said, her name dripping with mockery, "you're being charged with assault on an airline employee presenting false identification and making terroristic threats. The last charge was a complete fabrication, but it was the most serious one, a federal offense that could carry significant prison time." As the officers approached with handcuffs, the full gravity of her situation became clear. This wasn't just about one racist flight attendant anymore. This was a systemic issue that had permeated every level of the company she had built, right under her nose. And now, ironically, she was its victim. Hey everyone, this story is getting intense. What would you do if you were in Zara's position, right now? Comment number 1 if you think she should immediately call her lawyers and fight back hard. Or comment number 2 if you think she should keep her identity secret a little longer to expose the full extent of corruption. This kind of racial profiling happens every day to people without Zara's resources. How many of you have experienced or witnessed something similar? Hit that like button if you believe no one should face discrimination regardless of their status. And subscribe to follow Zara's fight against the system that's turning against her. Will Richard be able to help her before these false charges destroy her reputation? Or will Derek and Vanessa's conspiracy go even deeper than we've seen so far? Stay tuned to find out what happens when those with privilege abuse their power. The fluorescent lights of the police processing area flickered overhead as Zara stood for her mugshot, the camera flash momentarily blinding her. This wasn't supposed to happen to someone like her, a Harvard graduate, a tech innovator, a billionaire business owner. Yet here she was, being fingerprinted like a common criminal, while the board intake officer barely glanced at her protests of innocence. The holding cell was crowded with women arrested for various offenses, but Zara immediately noticed a pattern. The white women were processed quickly, their phone calls facilitated promptly, while women of color waited for hours. When she pointed this out to a guard, he merely shrugged and said, "That's just how the system works." The irony of her situation wasn't lost on Zara. She had spent years hiding behind corporate veils partly to avoid the racism she now faced head-on. The concrete bench was cold and uncomfortable as Zara watched the clock tick past midnight. Her mind raced through potential scenarios and solutions. Richard would be looking for her by now, but would he be able to navigate the deliberate obstruction she faced? Around 2 a.m., a guard finally called her name. "Washington, your lawyer's here." She hadn't called a lawyer, the call to Richard had been disconnected before she could ask him to send legal help. In the consultation room, Richard himself waited, his usually immaculate appearance showing signs of stress. "Zara, thank God. I've been searching everywhere. What happened?" She quickly recounted the events on the plane, the detention, and Derek Parker's escalating fabrications. Richard's face grew progressively darker. They had no right. This is clear discrimination and abuse of power. I've brought the company's attorney to get you released immediately. But even with Skyline Airways' legal department involved, the process moved painfully slowly. The desk sergeant seemed skeptical of Richard's claims about Zara's identity. If she's really who you say she is, why doesn't anyone know her? Where's her picture on the company website? Hours more passed before bail was finally arranged and the paperwork processed. Meanwhile, across town, an emergency meeting was taking place in a private dining room at the exclusive Chicago club. Vanessa and Derek Parker sat across from Bradley Thompson, one of Skyline Airways' most influential board members. Thompson, a 60-year-old white man with old aviation money and older prejudices, listened intently as the siblings described their encounter with the delusional passenger. "She was completely convincing," Vanessa admitted. "If I didn't know better, I might have believed her myself. She knew details about the company that aren't public knowledge." Thompson's interest was piqued. As one of the original investors in Skyline Airways, he had always resented the anonymous majority owner who communicated only through Richard Coleman and legal proxies. Decisions came down that he disagreed with, particularly regarding diversity, initiatives, and expanded routes to predominantly black cities, which he considered financially unsound despite their profitability. "This presents an interesting opportunity," Thompson mused, swirling his 30-year-old scotch. "If this woman is making such specific claims, she must have inside information. Perhaps she's connected to our mysterious owner, or perhaps she's part of a corporate espionage effort. Either way, we need to press full charges and investigate her thoroughly." What went unsaid but understood by all three was the racial subtext. Thompson had never hidden his disdain for the company's diversity policies. The opportunity to discredit a black woman making claims of ownership aligned perfectly with his personal agenda. The siblings nodded in agreement, Derek adding, I've already made sure the security footage from the plane won't contradict our version of events. By the time Zara finally exited the police station with Richard at 7 a.m., exhausted and disheveled, the damage to her reputation was already spreading. Someone had leaked her mugshot to local news outlets, and a story was running on morning television with the headline, "Woman claims to own airline during airport disturbance." The reporter solemnly intoned about mental health issues and identity delusions while showing Zara's mugshot alongside stock photos of Skyline Airways planes. Richard ushered her quickly to a waiting car. "We need to end this now," he insisted. "Go public with your identity. Use your resources to crush these fabricated charges." But Zara, despite her exhaustion, saw a different opportunity. "No," she decided. "I want to see how deep this goes. Someone authorized Derek Parker to falsify charges. Someone removed security footage. This isn't just about one racist flight. Attendant and her brother, it's systemic." Richard looked concerned. "Zara, they're building a case against you. This could get much worse before it gets better." "Then let it," she replied, her determination hardening. "Schedule an emergency board meeting for tomorrow. Don't tell them why. Just make it happen. And don't tell them I'll be there." What neither of them realized was that Thompson had already begun mobilizing resources against her. When Zara checked into a downtown hotel under a pseudonym to shower and rest, she found the door to her room ajar just 2 hours later. Inside, the room had been thoroughly searched, drawers emptied, and her laptop containing proprietary company information was missing. The invasion felt personal and calculated a message that nowhere was safe. The game was escalating rapidly, and the opponents were playing for keeps. The gleaming glass headquarters of Skyline Airways jutted into the Chicago skyline like an exclamation point, its distinctive blue and silver logo catching the morning sun. Zara stood before it in the same casual clothes she'd worn on her undercover flight, now wrinkled from her night in detention. Despite owning the building and everything in it, she felt a strange hesitation before entering her own company headquarters for the first time in months. "Ready?" Richard asked, standing beside her with a professional leather portfolio tucked under his arm. She nodded, squaring her shoulders. The security desk in the soaring lobby was their first obstacle. The guard, a young man Zara didn't recognize, looked suspiciously at her casual attire in the land of power suits and expensive accessories. "ID and purpose of visit," he requested, barely glancing at Richard, whose face regularly appeared in company communications. When Zara explained she was there for the board meeting, the guard smirked. "Ma'am, the executive floor requires proper authorization. I don't see your name on today's visitor list." Richard intervened. "She's with me. Executive authorization." The guard reluctantly allowed them to pass, but not before calling someone as they walked toward the elevator. By the time they reached the executive floor, Bradley Thompson was waiting by the elevator doors, his tall frame blocking their path. His silver hair was perfectly coiffed, his bespoke suit impeccable. Everything about him screamed old money and entrenched power. "Richard," he acknowledged with a curt nod before his gaze slid dismissively over Zara. "I wasn't aware you were bringing a guest to our confidential board meeting." His emphasis on confidential carried clear implications. Richard stood his ground. "Not a guest, Bradley. This is Zara Washington, majority shareholder and true owner of Skyline Airways." Thompson's laugh was controlled but condescending. "Richard, if this is your idea of a joke, it's in poor taste. We're all aware of the incident yesterday. This woman was arrested for causing a disturbance on one of our flights while claiming to be the owner. The police report is quite detailed." Zara stepped forward. "A falsified police report created by Derek Parker after his sister assaulted me. I chose to maintain my privacy as owner for personal reasons, but that doesn't make me any less the founder and controlling interest of this company." Thompson's expression hardened fractionally, but he maintained his veneer of civility as other board members began to arrive, looking curiously at the confrontation unfolding in the hallway. "Well," Thompson said smoothly, "this is certainly an interesting claim. Let's take this inside, shall we?" The boardroom was impressive, designed to intimidate with its 20-foot ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. and massive table of polished African blackwood. Zara had approved the design 5 years earlier, but had never actually sat at the table herself. The 12 board members took their usual seats, leaving Zara and Richard standing uncomfortably at the entrance. Thompson took control immediately. "Colleagues, Richard has brought a guest today who is making some extraordinary claims. She believes herself to be our anonymous majority shareholder." Murmurs spread around the table as Thompson continued. "While we would all certainly like to finally meet the mysterious force behind our company, there are protocols for such matters. Richard, surely you understand that we can't simply accept someone's word on such a crucial issue of corporate governance." Richard placed his portfolio on the table. "I have all the documentation here, including the original incorporation papers with Zara's signature, verification of her identity, and the chain of ownership through Washington Holdings." But Thompson was prepared. From his own briefcase, he withdrew a document and slid it across the table. "The company bylaws, which I'm sure you're familiar with, Richard. Section 7, paragraph 3. Any claim of ownership or controlling interest must be verified through independent legal counsel and financial auditing before being recognized by the board. We simply can't take your word for it, especially given the circumstances." He turned to Zara with false sympathy. "Ms. Washington, if that is indeed your name, you must understand our position. Yesterday you were arrested for disorderly conduct on one of our flights while making these same claims. How do we know you haven't somehow manipulated Richard?" Zara maintained her composure. "I can access all company systems with my credentials. That should be proof enough for today's purposes." She moved to the computer terminal at the end of the boardroom, only to find her login rejected. "Your access has been temporarily suspended," Thompson explained, not bothering to hide his satisfaction. "Standard security protocol when potential corporate espionage is suspected." One of the board members, a woman in her 50s who had been watching the exchange carefully, spoke up. "Bradley, if Richard vouches for her identity, surely we can give her the benefit of the doubt until proper verification?" Thompson's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Under normal circumstances, perhaps. But given recent events and the potential compromise of our company's leadership, I've invoked Article 12. A collective gasp went around the table. Article 12 was a rarely discussed emergency provision in the company charter, allowing for temporary leadership changes during crises. "A vote has been called," Thompson announced. "Until this matter is resolved through proper legal channels, we need interim leadership that isn't potentially compromised." Richard protested vehemently. "This is absurd. Article 12 was designed for situations like terrorist threats or natural disasters, not a simple identity verification." But Thompson had done his work well. One by one, board members voted in favor of the temporary leadership change, with only 3 holdouts supporting Richard's position. "The board has spoken," Thompson declared with barely concealed triumph. "Until Ms. Washington's claims can be properly verified, a process that typically takes several weeks, given the complexity of our ownership structure, I will serve as interim CEO, with all executive decisions requiring board approval." He turned to Richard. "Of course, your expertise is still valued, Richard. You're welcome to maintain your role during this transition, provided you cooperate fully with our investigation." The message was clear: Richard could keep his job only by abandoning Zara. To his credit, Richard didn't hesitate. "I resign, effective immediately. This board has just participated in a hostile takeover based on racism and personal ambition." He gathered his documents, nodding to Zara. Together they walked out, effectively locked out of the company she had built from nothing. In the elevator, Zara finally spoke. 15 years of my life. Everything I've built. And they take it away. In 15 minutes, because they can't believe a black woman could own an airline. Richard squeezed her shoulder supportively. "It's not over. We have options: legal recourse, media pressure, leverage with major clients who are loyal to your vision, even if they don't know you personally." As they crossed the lobby, a young white woman in a tailored suit approached them. "Mr. Coleman, Ms. Washington, I'm Amanda Wilson, PR Director. If I could have just a moment of your time, I might be able to help with this situation." Her smile seemed genuine, her offer timely. What Zara couldn't see was the recording device in Amanda's purse, capturing every word for Thompson's use. As they stepped outside to talk more privately, Zara's phone buzzed with an alert from her bank. All her personal accounts had been frozen due to a security investigation. The message was clear: whoever was behind this wasn't just after her company, they wanted to strip her of every resource and ability to fight back. Zara showed Richard the notification. His face paled. "They're moving faster than I anticipated. They must have connections in banking or law enforcement." He pulled out his phone to contact their legal team, only to find his company email and access already revoked. The systematic dismantling of their professional lives was happening with frightening efficiency. Zara watched as the security guard, who had initially prevented their entry, now spoke into his radio while staring directly at them. The message couldn't have been clearer. Their presence was no longer welcome at the building bearing the company name she had chosen. "They want us, isolated and powerless," Zara realized aloud. "This isn't just business, it's personal." The next morning, Zara woke up in Richard's guest bedroom to the sound of her name being mentioned on the television. Still groggy from the restless night, she grabbed the remote and turned up the volume. Her mugshot filled the screen as the news anchor spoke with practiced concern. Sources close to Skyline Airways have confirmed that the woman, Zara Washington, has a history of mental health issues and identity confusion. Experts suggest this may be a case of delusional disorder. Zara sat frozen, watching as her life was rewritten before her eyes. The segment cut to security footage from the plane showing her appearing agitated and confrontational, but conveniently, omitting Vanessa's slap that had started the incident. A psychologist who had never met Zara offered commentary on persecution delusions and grandiose identity fantasies, while her face remained on screen beside clinical definitions of various mental disorders. Richard appeared at the doorway, his expression grim. "It's on every channel and all over social media. They're moving fast." He handed her his tablet, open to an article by Claire Bennett, a journalist known for her cutting exposés. The headline read, "The Woman Who Would Be Queen, Anatomy of an Aviation Con Artist." The article painted Zara as a sophisticated scammer with a history of identity fraud, citing anonymous close sources who detailed fabricated past schemes and failed cons. Every achievement in her actual life, her software innovations, her business acumen, her philanthropic work was either ignored or reframed as a calculated deception designed to build credibility for her biggest con yet. "This Claire Bennett never even contacted me for comment," Zara said, scrolling through the character. "Assassination disguised as journalism." "That's because she's on Thompson's payroll," Richard replied. "She's been writing favorable pieces about him for years." As they searched for other outlets that might give Zara's side of the story, they discovered a pattern. Major news organizations either ignored their outreach entirely or conducted brief interviews that were then edited to make Zara appear evasive or unstable. One reporter seemed genuinely interested in the truth, recording a 2-hour interview with Zara that detailed the discrimination she'd faced and the evidence of Thompson's conspiracy. When the piece aired, it had been cut to 30 seconds focusing entirely on why she had hidden her identity, framed to imply she had something to hide. The digital assault continued throughout the day. Zara's social media accounts were hacked, with racist and inflammatory posts appearing under her name. Former colleagues suddenly emerged with stories about her being difficult or unstable, carefully worded to avoid outright libel while painting a damaging portrait. Just after noon, Skyline Airways issued an official statement distancing themselves from the imposter and announcing Bradley Thompson as interim CEO during this period of organizational vulnerability. The statement described Vanessa Parker as a dedicated employee with an exemplary record who had been traumatized by the encounter with Ms. Washington. It ended with a commitment to maintaining the highest standards of professionalism and inclusive service that our diverse customers expect. The kind of diversity language Zara herself had written into the company mission, now weaponized against her. "They're not just taking your company," Richard observed bitterly. "They're taking your reputation, your history, your whole identity." When they attempted to retrieve documentation from Zara's private office in her residence, the only place where Physical copies of her original ownership papers were stored. They found the locks changed and private security guards posted outside. One of the guards, not unkindly, handed Richard an envelope. Inside was a restraining order prohibiting Zara from coming within 500 feet of any Skyline Airways property or personnel on the grounds that she was harassing company employees by impersonating the owner. The document was signed by a judge whose name Richard recognized as a frequent guest at Thompson's charity events. How are they doing this so efficiently? Zara wondered aloud as they retreated to Richard's car. It's like they've had this playbook ready and waiting. Richard's expression was grim. I think they have. Bradley Thompson has been fighting your diversity initiatives and community investment programs since day one. He's just been waiting for an opportunity to seize control. The weight of the realization settled heavily on Zara. Every inclusive policy she had created, every barrier she had broken, every opportunity she had opened for people who looked like her was now being systematically dismantled by people who had resented those changes all along. Her phone rang an unfamiliar number. Hesitantly, she answered. Zara Washington. This is Marcus Johnson. I just landed from Tokyo and have 16 missed calls from Richard. What the hell is going on? The sound of her old friend's voice after so long nearly broke her composure. Marcus had been her attorney since before Skyline Airways existed, handling her software patents and later the complex ownership structure of the airline. He had been in Japan negotiating Asian route expansions, completely unaware of the chaos that had erupted in his absence. Marcus, she said, her voice finally betraying the strain of the past 48 hours. They've taken everything. The company, my reputation, my home. I need your help. There was a brief pause before Marcus responded, his voice steel beneath the typical lawyer's calm. Tell me where to meet you. They've picked the wrong woman to mess with. Unbelievable, right? What would you do if you woke up to see your face on TV being called mentally ill when you were perfectly sane? Comment number 1. If you think the media should be held accountable for publishing false information, or number 2. If you believe they're just doing their job reporting what their sources tell them. This kind of character assassination happens to people who challenge the system all the time. Have you ever been misrepresented or had your words twisted by someone in power? Hit that like button if you believe everyone deserves the right to tell their own story, and subscribe to see whether Zara and Marcus can fight back against this coordinated attack. Will Thompson's media machine be too powerful to overcome? Can Zara reclaim her identity when so many forces are working against her? And what desperate measures might she need to take when all legitimate paths are blocked? Stay with me to find out how deep this conspiracy really goes. Marcus Johnson's downtown law office became their war room. The walls were soon covered with documents, timelines, and strategy maps as they charted their counterattack. Marcus, a tall, imposing black man with 20 years of courtroom experience, had already filed emergency motions seeking to restore Zara's access to her company and freeze any major decisions by the interim leadership. The judge should rule on our emergency injunction by morning, Marcus explained, loosening his tie after a long day of legal filings. In the meantime, we need to secure all documentation proving your ownership. Richard pulled up company records on his personal laptop. That's where we're hitting roadblocks. Someone has been systematically altering records in the company database. Dates have been changed, signatures modified just enough to create doubt without being obvious forgeries. Zara scrolled through the digital copies, her concern growing. They've changed the incorporation date to make it appear I couldn't have been involved because I was still working at my previous company. Clever. Marcus studied the modified documents. This level of sophistication suggests planning and resources. They were ready for this opportunity. Their suspicions about Thompson's preparedness were confirmed the next morning when they appeared in court. The judge assigned to their emergency hearing was Harold Whitfield, a former law partner of Thompson's brother-in-law. Despite Marcus's skilled argumentation and the documentation they presented, Judge Whitfield appeared skeptical from the start. These ownership claims require substantial verification, he pronounced. Given the serious nature of the allegations, on both sides I'm setting a full hearing for 3 weeks from now to allow proper discovery. 3 weeks was an eternity, given the speed at which Thompson was dismantling Zara's company. When Marcus attempted to at least get a temporary freeze on major corporate decisions, Judge Whitfield denied the request, citing the operational needs of a major airline and the board's proper invocation of emergency protocols. Outside the courthouse, Marcus didn't hide his frustration. The deck is stacked. Whitfield and Thompson belong to the same country club. Their kids went to school together. I should have seen this coming and requested another judge. While they fought these initial legal battles, Thompson was moving quickly. Press releases announced the streamlining of Skyline's operations, eliminating the diversity and community programs Zara had championed. Longtime employees known to be loyal to Richard and the company's original mission were being terminated, under the guise of restructuring. Most disturbing was the news that Thompson was in talks to sell several of Skyline's most profitable routes to Meridian Airlines, a competitor where Thompson secretly held significant stock, a clear conflict of interest that the business press largely ignored. The personal attacks continued as well. Zara received anonymous text messages warning her to walk away while you still can and know your place. The apartment where she had been staying suddenly had code violations, requiring immediate evacuation. When she moved to a hotel, her credit cards were declined despite having accounts at multiple banks. "They're trying to make me desperate," she told Richard and Marcus over a takeout dinner in Marcus's office. "Cut off my resources, isolate me, break my spirit." Marcus nodded grimly. Classic intimidation tactics. But they've underestimated who they're dealing with. The next morning, they arrived at Marcus's office to find the door lock broken and the space thoroughly ransacked. File cabinets had been emptied, computers stolen. The police officer taking their report seemed uninterested, suggesting it was probably just random thieves looking for electronics, but nothing else of value had been taken, only Zara's files. "We need those backup documents from your safe deposit box," Richard reminded her. "Those original papers and banking records are our best evidence." The safe deposit box had been Zara's insurance policy, a secure location containing notarized original documents establishing her ownership of Skyline Airways, separate from any company records that could be altered. When they arrived at the bank, however, they discovered someone had already accessed the box using a forged authorization. The bank manager showed them the signature card with what appeared to be Zara's signature, dated just 2 days earlier. The box was empty. The systematic dismantling of her defenses was taking its toll. That night, alone in yet another hotel room after relocating for security concerns, Zara experienced her first panic attack. Her chest tightened, breathing became difficult, and overwhelming dread crashed over her in waves. She managed to call Richard, who rushed over and sat with her until the symptoms subsided. "I didn't realize how much this was affecting me," she admitted, embarrassed by what she perceived as weakness. "It's not just the company, it's like they're erasing me as a person." Richard squeezed her hand supportively. "That's exactly what they're trying to do, but we won't let them succeed." The next day brought another blow. When they finally secured a preliminary hearing date, Thompson's legal team produced a surprise, a woman claiming to be the real Zara Washington. This imposter, a confident white woman in her 40s, came with falsified historical photos and documents suggesting she had been using the pseudonym Victoria White for business purposes for years, while being the actual founder behind Skyline Airways. The audacity of the move was breathtaking, replacing Zara with a white woman who would claim credit for her life's work. Judge Whitfield, presented with 2 people claiming the same identity, once again delayed ruling. "The court needs time to determine the legitimate party," he declared. "Both claimants are prohibited from making significant changes to company operations pending verification of identity." While this ruling at least temporarily halted Thompson's more radical changes, it also legitimized the absurd imposter strategy and further delayed justice. Outside the courtroom, Marcus was blunt in his assessment. "They're playing for time. Each day Thompson controls the company is another day to entrench his position and erase your legacy." Zara stared at the imposter being escorted to a waiting town car, surrounded by Thompson's legal team. "They really believed they could replace me with a white woman, and the system would just accept it." Richard nodded grimly. "Because it often does." But not this time. Not if we can help it. Richard's phone rang just after midnight. He fumbled in the darkness, checking the caller ID before answering. Unknown number glowed on the screen. Normally he would ignore such calls, but given recent events, he pressed accept. Hello? The voice on the other end was female, hushed and frightened. Mr. Coleman? I need to talk to you about what happened to Ms. Washington on Flight 237. I can't say much now, they might be monitoring calls. Richard sat up, instantly alert. Who is this? My name is Jessica. I was a flight attendant on that flight. What happened to her? What Ms. Parker did, it wasn't right. I've been afraid to come forward, but I can't sleep knowing what they're doing to her. Hope surged through Richard. Jessica, what you're saying could change everything. Can we meet? The line went silent for so long Richard thought she'd hung up. Finally she whispered, tomorrow, 7 a.m., Lakeside Coffee Shop on Michigan Avenue. Come alone. Before Richard could ask more questions, the line went dead. He immediately called Zara and Marcus, setting up a secure three-way call. This could be the break we've been waiting for, Marcus said after Richard explained. An eyewitness who can contradict Vanessa's version of events. Zara was cautiously optimistic. If she's legitimate, this could also be a setup to discredit us further. Despite the risk, they agreed Richard would meet Jessica alone. He was less recognizable than Zara, whose face had been plastered across the media. The Lakeside Coffee Shop was bustling with morning commuters when Richard arrived 10 minutes early. He chose a table with a clear view of the entrance and waited, scanning each new arrival. At precisely 7 a.m., a young woman in her 20s with auburn hair entered, nervously scanning the room. She spotted Richard and approached hesitantly. Mr. Coleman? He nodded, gesturing to the chair across from him. Jessica sat down, her hands fidgeting with a paper napkin. I could lose my job for talking to you. Worse, actually. The Parker siblings have made it clear what happens to people who cross them. Richard assured her that her identity would be protected. As Jessica sipped her coffee, her story spilled out. She had been working in first class alongside Vanessa during the fateful flight. She witnessed Vanessa's unprovoked hostility toward Zara from the moment she boarded, making snide comments to other crew members about keeping these people in their place. When Vanessa spotted Zara taking notes on her phone about the service, she became paranoid about receiving a negative evaluation. That's when she just snapped, Jessica explained. She accused Ms. Washington of sneaking into first class, even though I had checked her boarding pass myself earlier. When Ms. Washington tried to explain, Vanessa just slapped her. I couldn't believe it. What made Jessica's testimony particularly valuable was what she revealed next. I was so shocked that I started recording on my phone after the slap. It's against policy to film during service, but I knew something was very wrong. I caught the whole thing: Vanessa forcing Ms. Washington to move, making those awful comments, and later calling her brother to detain her. Richard could barely contain his excitement. Jessica, that video could prove everything. It could undo all the damage they've done. Jessica nodded, reaching into her purse. I know. That's why I brought it. I kept it hidden on my personal cloud account, not my phone. She pulled out a small USB drive. It's all here, the original unedited video. But you need to know they're watching for this. Derek has the entire security team looking for anyone who might have evidence from that flight. Richard took the drive carefully. We'll protect you, Jessica. Your courage means more than you know. As they were finishing their coffee, Jessica's phone buzzed. The color drained from her face as she read the message. It's my supervisor. I've been called in for an immediate performance review. They know I'm here. They must be tracking my phone. Richard tried to reassure her, but Jessica was already gathering her things, panic evident in her movements. I have to go. Use the video. Help Ms. Washington. What they're doing to her, it's not just about one incident. This happens all the time, just usually to people who can't fight back. Before Richard could respond, Jessica hurried out of the cafe. He immediately called Marcus, arranging to meet at his office to review the evidence. But when they tried to open the files on the USB drive, the video was corrupted, unplayable. This can't be a coincidence, Marcus growled, trying various recovery programs without success. The file was fine when she gave it to you. They quickly traced Jessica's employee record, hoping to contact her again, only to discover she had been terminated that morning for violation of customer privacy policies and unauthorized absence. The termination had been processed by Derek Parker personally. Richard managed to find her cell number through company records, but all calls went straight to voicemail. When they finally reached her roommate, the young woman informed them that Jessica had received a substantial severance package contingent on signing an extensive non-disclosure agreement. She had also been booked on a company-paid stress relief retreat to a resort in Arizona, effectively removing her from reach. "They got to her," Zara said when Richard reported back, "and they corrupted the only copy of the video we had." The systematic elimination of evidence and witnesses was becoming a pattern they couldn't break. That afternoon, Thompson announced a major press conference scheduled for the following week to address the future direction of Skyline Airways under new leadership. Industry analysts were already speculating about route sales and a potential merger with Meridian Airlines, which would generate enormous profits for Thompson and his allies while dismantling much of what made Skyline unique. Through his sources in the company, Richard learned that the whistleblower had been identified through surveillance camera footage from the coffee shop. More disturbing, he discovered that Thompson had assigned people to follow not just Richard and Zara, but also anyone who contacted them. The message was clear: speak against the new regime, and you would be next on their list. With Jessica neutralized and the video evidence corrupted, Zara suggested a desperate measure. The backup server in the data center on Michigan Avenue. It has the original company formation documents, including my authenticated digital signatures. It's on a secure system separate from the main company network. The storage system had been Zara's insurance policy, designed to be accessible only with her biometric data and personal access codes. If they could reach it, they would have irrefutable proof of her identity and ownership. But when they arrived at the nondescript building housing the secure data center, they found Victor Reynolds waiting in the lobby, flanked by security guards. Reynolds, a 50-ish man with the bearing of a former military officer, approached them with a cold smile. "Ms. Washington, Mr. Coleman, I'm afraid I can't allow you access to these facilities today." Richard recognized him as an FAA investigator known to be friendly with Thompson. "On what grounds?" Zara demanded. "Federal investigation," Reynolds replied smoothly. "We've received credible information regarding potential corporate espionage involving Skyline Airways' proprietary data. All access is restricted pending our investigation." It was another fabricated obstacle, legally dubious but effective in the moment. Any attempt to force their way past would result in federal charges. As they retreated to their car, defeated once again, a man approached them in the parking lot, looking nervously over his shoulder. "Ms. Washington? Mr. Coleman? I'm Michael Chen. I was your executive assistant before Mr. Thompson fired me." Zara recognized him immediately. Michael had been her right-hand man for years, though they had interacted primarily through secure communications rather than in person. "Michael, what are you doing here?" "I've been gathering evidence," he said quietly, "downloading what I could before they locked us out of the systems. Recordings of Thompson's meetings, emails about the coordinated attack on your reputation. I even managed to get security footage from the plane before they deleted it completely." Hope flared again. "Michael, that's incredible. Where is it?" "I've been keeping it hidden. They've been following me home, searching my apartment when I'm out." He reached into his pocket. "It's all on this drive. Encrypted, but I have the keys. It's everything you need to prove what they've done." Before he could hand over the drive, a black SUV with tinted windows screeched around the corner of the parking garage. Instead of slowing, it accelerated directly toward them. "Look out!" Michael shouted, pushing Zara out of the path. The SUV slammed into their parked car with devastating force, crushing it against a concrete pillar. The impact threw Michael 20 feet, while Richard and Zara were knocked down by the shockwave. As quickly as it had appeared, the SUV reversed and sped away, tires squealing on the concrete. No license plate was visible. Zara scrambled to Michael's crumpled form, blood pooling beneath him. Richard was already calling 911, his own arm hanging at an unnatural angle from the impact. As sirens wailed in the distance, Zara searched desperately for the drive Michael had mentioned, but it was nowhere to be found. Either it had been thrown clear in the impact, or more likely, someone had retrieved it in the chaos. The message couldn't have been clearer. This was no longer just about corporate control. They were willing to kill to keep their power. The antiseptic smell of the hospital permeated everything as Zara slowly regained consciousness. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, and a steady beeping from nearby monitors marked the rhythm of her survival. Her head throbbed with dull pain, and her ribs protested with every breath. Memories of the attack came back in disjointed flashes, the SUV appearing without warning, Michael pushing her to safety, the terrible sound of impact. A nurse noticed her stirring and approached the bed. "Ms. Washington, can you hear me? Try not to move too much. You have a mild concussion and 2 bruised ribs." Zara's first thought was of the others. Michael Chen, Richard Coleman. The nurse's expression shifted subtly. "Mr. Coleman is in room 302. His arm required surgery, but he's stable." She hesitated before continuing. "Mr. Chen is in the intensive care unit. He suffered significant internal injuries and head trauma. He's currently in an induced coma. The doctors are doing everything they can." The gravity of the situation settled on Zara like a physical weight. Michael had risked everything to help her, and now he was fighting for his life. The backup drive that could have turned the tide in their favor was missing, presumed taken by whoever had orchestrated the attack. Once the nurse had checked her vitals and left, Zara carefully reached for the television remote. She needed to know if the attack was being reported accurately. The local news was in the middle of a story about Skyline Airways. The chyron at the bottom of the screen read, "Skyline CEO announces major restructuring, stock rises." The press conference Thompson had scheduled was proceeding as planned, despite the attempted murder of 3 people just hours earlier. The camera showed Thompson at a podium, looking confident and in control as he detailed his vision for the company's future. "After careful analysis, we've identified significant inefficiencies in our operational model," he announced to the assembled reporters. "By streamlining our route structure and forming strategic partnerships, we project a 25% increase in shareholder value over the next fiscal year." What he didn't say explicitly, but Zara understood all too well, was that this streamlining meant dismantling the airline's industry-leading diversity initiatives, cutting routes to underserved communities, and rolling back the employee benefits and fairness policies she had implemented. Everything she had built was being systematically erased. Even more disturbing was the complete absence of any mention of the attack. No reports of a hit Andron, no connection to the ongoing corporate drama. Thompson had enough influence to keep it out of the news cycle entirely. Later that day, Marcus visited, his face grim as he moved between Zara's room and Richard's. "The police report lists it as a random hit Andron," he informed them. "No suspects, no investigation beyond the basic report. The detective I spoke with seemed strangely uninterested in pursuing it further." He lowered his voice. "I think Thompson has connections in the department. This is being buried." Richard, joining them in a wheelchair with his arm in a cast and sling, shared equally disturbing news. "My sources in the company say Thompson is moving faster than we anticipated. The diversity programs have already been shut down. The foundation funds are being reallocated to marketing partnerships with Thompson's other business interests." Zara barely had time to process this information before Claire Bennett, the journalist who had written the initial hit pieces against her, requested an interview. Against Marcus's advice, Zara agreed to see her, hoping that the severity of recent events might have shifted Bennett's perspective. It was a miscalculation. The article published the next day portrayed Zara as unstable and potentially dangerous, suggesting that she might have staged the accident herself as part of an escalating pattern of delusional behavior. The piece even implied a connection to corporate espionage, claiming sources close to federal investigators had evidence she was working with foreign competitors to undermine American aviation. On her 3rd day in the hospital, Zara decided to visit Michael in the ICU, despite doctors' recommendations that she rest. She needed to see for herself the human cost of her fight. Michael lay surrounded by machines, tubes running from his body, his face barely recognizable beneath the swelling and medical tape. As she stood by his bed, a nurse entered to check his vitals. After completing her tasks, the nurse hesitated, then spoke in a hushed tone. Ms. Washington, I thought you should know there have been men asking about Mr. Chen's condition. They don't identify themselves as family or friends, but they seem very interested in when he might wake up or be moved. The implication was clear. Michael remained a target. Whoever had tried to kill him wanted to ensure he couldn't share what he knew. With this realization came another sobering thought. Their resources were dwindling rapidly. Marcus's law firm was facing pressure from other clients to drop Zara's toxic case, with several major clients threatening to take their business elsewhere if he continued representing her. Richard reported that his home had been broken into, his personal files ransacked. Everyone connected to Zara was paying a price. That evening, alone in her hospital room, Zara contemplated giving up. Perhaps if she walked away, accepting the loss of her company, the others would be left alone. The thought had barely formed when there was a soft knock at her door. To her surprise, Amanda Wilson, the PR director who had approached her and Richard, outside Skyline headquarters, slipped into the room, closing the door quietly behind her. "I don't have much time," Amanda said, her confident facade replaced by nervous energy. "They don't know I'm here, but it won't take long for them to figure it out." Zara regarded her suspiciously. "Why should I trust you? You work for Thompson." Amanda's expression hardened. "I worked for Skyline Airways, for the principles it stood for under your leadership, even if I didn't know it was you. What Thompson is doing, it's not just wrong, it's illegal. And what happened to Michael?" She shook her head. "That crossed a line I never signed up for." Over the next 20 minutes, Amanda revealed that she had been recording Thompson's meetings and phone calls for weeks, initially as insurance for her own position, but increasingly out of moral objection to his actions. He and the Parker siblings, they talk openly about their plans, thinking everyone in the room is loyal. The things they say about you, about black employees and passengers. She pulled out a small recorder. "I have it all. Thompson discussing the fabricated evidence against you. Derek Parker admitting to deleting security footage. Vanessa laughing about how she'll be promoted for putting you in your place. It's all here." For the first time in days, Zara felt a surge of hope. "Amanda, this could change everything. Why are you doing this?" "I want immunity," Amanda replied frankly. "And compensation. When this all comes out, Thompson will make sure no one associated with him works in this industry again. I need protection." It was a transactional offer, not a moral awakening. But Zara was in no position to judge motivations. "We can work something out, but we need to get those recordings to Marcus immediately." As they were discussing logistics, a loud crash came from the corridor. Male voices shouted commands and heavy footsteps approached Zara's room. "They found me," Amanda whispered, panic rising in her voice. "Derek's security team, they must have tracked my phone." Zara pointed to the bathroom. "Quick in there. There's a window that opens to the fire escape." As Amanda slipped into the bathroom, the door to Zara's room burst open. Two men in dark suits entered, their manner suggesting they weren't hospital staff or police. "Ms. Washington," one began with false politeness. "We need to speak with Ms. Wilson. We know she came to this room." Before Zara could respond, a commotion from the bathroom indicated Amanda had managed to open the window. The men rushed toward the sound, but by the time they reached the bathroom, Amanda had disappeared into the night, taking with her the evidence that might finally turn the tide. Can you believe how far these people are willing to go? Comment number 1. If you think corporations and people in power should face criminal charges when they resort to violence like this. Or number 2, if you think this kind of corporate warfare happens more often than we realize, but remains hidden from public view. I can't help but wonder how many real whistleblowers like Jessica and Michael have been silenced in the real world. Has anyone watching ever had to choose between speaking up about wrongdoing or protecting their own safety? Hit that like button if you believe whistleblowers deserve more protection, and subscribe if you want to see whether Amanda's evidence will finally give Zara the break she desperately needs. With Michael in a coma and Richard injured, is Zara running out of allies? Will Amanda's recordings be enough to expose Thompson's conspiracy? Or will her credibility be attacked just like everyone else who tries to help Zara? And most importantly, how will Zara and Amanda escape from Derek's security team that's closing in on them right now? Stay tuned to find out if justice will finally prevail, or if the powerful will continue to crush anyone who stands in their way. Zara slipped out of her hospital room against medical advice, her bruised ribs protesting with each careful step. The security guards had searched the entire floor, but found no sign of Amanda. Using a service elevator to avoid detection, Zara made her way to the parking garage where Marcus waited in his car, engine running. "Any sign of her?" he asked as Zara eased into the passenger seat. "Nothing. She vanished before Derek's men could catch her. We need to find her before they do." Marcus pulled away from the hospital, checking his rearview mirror frequently for signs of pursuit. "I've got Richard moved to a private facility under an alias. He'll be safe there while he recovers. Now we need to locate Amanda without leading Thompson's people straight to her." Zara's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Harbor Point Motel, room 116. Come alone. 1 hour." "It's Amanda," Zara said, showing Marcus the message. His expression remained skeptical. "Could be a trap. They could have her phone. It's a risk we have to take. Those recordings might be our last chance." The Harbor Point Motel was a rundown establishment on the city's outskirts, the kind of place that accepted cash and asked no questions. Marcus parked a block away, insisting on performing a careful reconnaissance before letting Zara approach the room. "No suspicious vehicles," he reported. "No obvious security or surveillance. If it's a trap, it's not an elaborate one." When they knocked on room 116, Amanda opened the door just enough to verify their identities before quickly ushering them inside. The room was sparse and shabby, with faded floral wallpaper and a bed that had seen better decades. Amanda looked disheveled, her designer clothes out of place in the surroundings. "I had to ditch my phone, credit cards, everything they could track," she explained. "I've been using the motel clerk's phone to contact you, paid him extra to keep quiet." "Smart move," Marcus acknowledged. "What exactly do you have that can help us?" Amanda retrieved a small recorder from her purse. "Audio recordings from key meetings and conversations over the past 2 weeks. Thompson doesn't believe in written records of anything controversial. He keeps things verbal to avoid leaving a paper trail, but he never suspected I'd be recording." She pressed play, and Thompson's voice filled the small room. "The problem isn't just getting rid of Washington. It's making sure her entire vision for the company gets erased. Diversity initiatives cut into the bottom line. Routes to these urban markets aren't worth the security issues. We need to return to our core demographic." Another recording captured Vanessa Parker laughing about the incident on the plane. "You should have seen her face when I slapped her. These people always think they belong anywhere they want until someone puts them in their place." Most damning was Derek Parker discussing the evidence tampering. "The security footage has been cleaned up. Nothing shows the actual confrontation, just her looking aggressive afterward. The witness statements all back Vanessa's version now. Anyone who says different won't be employed long enough to testify." "This is exactly what we need," Zara said, hope rising for the first time in days. "With these recordings we can prove conspiracy, evidence tampering, discrimination." "There's more," Amanda interrupted. "I have recording devices hidden in the boardroom in Thompson's office. They contain weeks of evidence, including conversations about the fake Zara Washington they produced in their plans for dismantling your company policies." Zara's excitement faltered. "Where are these devices?" "Still in place, at headquarters." The implications were clear. They would need to return to Skyline Airways headquarters, the heart of enemy territory, to retrieve the rest of the evidence. Before they could begin planning this dangerous mission, a noise outside the motel room window caught their attention. Amanda quickly turned off the lights while Marcus cautiously peered through the curtains. 2 SUVs just pulled into the lot, men in suits getting out. It's Thompson's security team. "How did they find us?" Zara whispered. "The motel clerk," Amanda realized. "They must have paid him more than I did." They quickly gathered their essentials and slipped out the back window of the ground floor room. Crouching behind parked cars, they watched as Derek's men surrounded room 116, breaking down the door with practiced efficiency. "My car's too far," Marcus whispered. "We need another way out." Zara spotted a service entrance to the adjacent strip mall. "Through there," We can cut through the stores and find transportation on the other side." As they hurried across the parking lot, staying low between vehicles, Zara formulated a plan. They would need a distraction to occupy Thompson and his security team while they retrieved the hidden recording devices. Richard, though injured, could help from his secure location by leaking a story through his remaining media contacts that Zara had fled the country. While Thompson's attention was diverted by this false lead, they would make their move. 2 nights later, their plan was in motion. A breaking news story claimed Zara Washington had been spotted boarding a private flight to the Cayman Islands, supposedly fleeing prosecution. While Thompson and his team scrambled to verify this information and alert their contacts at immigration, Zara and Amanda approached Skyline headquarters through the service entrance, disguised as members of the night cleaning crew. The uniforms and fake IDs Richard had arranged gave them access to the building, but the executive floor required special clearance. "The security desk is staffed 24/7, Amanda warned as they pushed their cleaning cart into the service elevator. "But they change shifts at 2 a.m. There's about a 5-minute window when the desk is minimally monitored." Timing their arrival perfectly, they slipped past the security checkpoint during the shift change, Amanda waving casually at the departing guard who recognized her only as a vague corporate figure, not someone breaking in after hours. The executive floor was dimly lit, with only emergency lighting illuminating their path. Amanda moved with purpose, retrieving tiny recording devices hidden behind picture frames, beneath desk drawers, and inside air vents. 3 more to go, she whispered as they entered Thompson's private office. "The most important ones are here in the main boardroom." As Amanda carefully extracted a device hidden in Thompson's desk phone, Zara kept watch by the door. The building was largely empty, but security performed random patrols that could intercept them at any moment. With the devices from Thompson's office secured, they moved toward the boardroom at the end of the corridor. Suddenly, a security guard rounded the corner ahead, forcing them to duck into a side office. Through the crack in the door, they watched him pass, his flashlight beam sweeping across the hallway. "That was close," Amanda breathed once the guard had moved on. The boardroom devices contain the most explicit conversations. Thompson feels safe there, speaks freely about his real motivations. The boardroom doors were locked, but Amanda had anticipated this and brought her access card, which still worked despite her unofficial absence from the company. Inside, she quickly located and retrieved 2 more devices, one hidden in the base of the conference phone, another concealed in a ceiling vent. "Got them all," she announced triumphantly. "Let's get out of here." As they turned to leave, the boardroom lights suddenly blazed on. Derek Parker stood in the doorway, a satisfied smile on his face. "I had a feeling you might try something like this," he said, blocking their exit. "The cleaning crew disguise? Clever but predictable." 2 more security guards appeared behind him, effectively trapping them in the room. Derek's smile widened as he approached. "Did you really think we wouldn't be monitoring Ms. Wilson's access card? It sent an alert the moment she used it." He gestured to the recording devices in Amanda's hand. "I'll take those. Evidence of corporate espionage, I believe." "The only evidence here is of your crimes," Zara replied, maintaining her composure despite the dire situation. "Assault, fraud, evidence tampering, conspiracy, the list keeps growing." Derek laughed, the sound echoing in the large room. "Crimes? Against who? A delusional woman making false claims? No one will believe anything on those recordings once we explain how you manipulated the audio." He moved closer, his voice dropping to a menacing tone. "People like you don't belong in charge. You never did. Thompson is just restoring the natural order." Unbeknownst to Derek, Amanda had activated one of the recorders when the lights came on. His unfiltered admission was being captured in real time, adding to their evidence if they could only escape with it. "Now," Derek continued, "you're going to hand over all recording devices, and then you're both going to be escorted from the premises in handcuffs. Breaking and entering corporate espionage, these are serious charges. Ms. Washington won't be concerning herself with airline ownership from prison." Just as Derek reached for the devices, the boardroom door opened again. To everyone's surprise, Victor Reynolds, the FAA investigator who had blocked their access to the data center, stepped into the room. "That's enough, Parker," Reynolds said firmly. Let them go. Derek turned, confusion evident on his face. Reynolds, what are you doing here? This is a security matter, not FAA jurisdiction. Reynolds approached slowly, his expression grave. Actually, it is FAA jurisdiction when it involves tampering with safety records and improper certification of aircraft modifications. He turned to Zara. Ms. Washington, I owe you an apology. I'm not actually from the FAA's regulatory division. I'm from internal affairs. We've been investigating Bradley Thompson for months on suspicion of approving unsafe aircraft modifications in exchange for kickbacks. The revelation stunned everyone in the room. Reynolds continued, addressing Derek directly. We had suspicions, but lacked concrete evidence until recently. Your activities against Ms. Washington accelerated our timeline. He turned back to Zara. We need your evidence to complete our case. Thompson's discrimination against you caught our attention, but his corruption puts passengers at risk. That's where the federal charges come in. Derek's face had lost its confidence, replaced by calculation. You're bluffing. Thompson has friends in Washington. This investigation won't go anywhere. Those friends are distancing themselves as we speak, Reynolds replied. No one wants to be connected to safety violations, especially after what happened with the 737 MAX scandals. Aviation safety is one area where even the most connected can't escape scrutiny. For the first time since the ordeal began, Zara sensed a genuine shift in momentum. Reynolds was offering not just belief in her story, but federal resources to fight back. We'll cooperate fully, she told Reynolds, but we need guarantees of our safety and protection for our evidence. Derek, seeing his advantage slipping away, made a desperate move toward the door. I need to contact Mr. Thompson immediately. That won't be necessary, Reynolds said, blocking his path. Federal agents are already speaking with him at his residence. Derek's face contorted with fury. You have no idea who you're dealing with. This isn't over, not by a long shot. As he pushed past Reynolds toward the exit, the building's emergency alarm suddenly blared to life. Lights flashed, and automated announcements instructed all occupants to remain in place. Security lockdown, Derek explained with a smirk. Standard. Protocol for suspected corporate espionage. All exits are automatically secured. No one leaves until I authorize it. He spoke into his radio, instructing his team to converge on the executive floor. Did I mention? The FBI's jurisdiction doesn't override building security protocols. We're all staying put until my team arrives in full force, and they answer to me, not some federal investigator with delusions of grandeur. The trap had been reversed. Now they were the ones confined, with Derek's security force closing in. We need to move now, Zara said, assessing their deteriorating situation. Derek's entire security team will be here in minutes. Reynolds checked his phone, frustration evident on his face. No signal. They've activated the security protocol that blocks communications. My backup team won't know anything's wrong. Derek watched their growing concern with satisfaction, positioning himself between them and the main exit. The executive floor has its own security team. By the time the building lockdown is lifted, you'll all be detained and those recording devices will have mysteriously malfunctioned. Zara exchanged looks with Amanda, a silent understanding passing between them. During her years of secret ownership, Zara had overseen every detail of the headquarters construction, including features known only to her and a select few. We need a distraction, she whispered to Amanda. Nodding slightly, Amanda suddenly gasped and clutched her chest, collapsing to the floor in a convincing display of medical distress. As everyone's attention turned to her, Zara slipped behind the boardroom's massive African blackwood credenza and pressed a hidden panel. A section of the wall silently slid open, revealing a concealed executive elevator installed as an emergency exit for the company's leadership. This way, she called to Reynolds and Amanda, who instantly abandoned her performance and scrambled toward the hidden door. Derek lunged to stop them, but Reynolds intercepted him, using his federal agent training to temporarily restrain him. Moments later, they were all inside the private elevator, the door closing just as Derek broke free. How did you know this was here? Reynolds asked as the elevator descended rapidly. I designed it, Zara replied simply. This building has several features known only to me and the original architects. It was my failsafe in case of corporate hostility or external threats. The elevator bypassed the security lockdown, operating on an independent system connected directly to the building's emergency power supply. It opened into a small, unmarked corridor that led to the underground parking garage, deliberately positioned, away from security cameras. We have maybe 2 minutes before Derek realizes where we've gone, Zara calculated as they hurried through the corridor. The parking garage connects to 3 different exit points. If we split up, at least one of us should make it out with the evidence. Just as they reached the garage, they heard the pounding of footsteps behind them. Vanessa Parker emerged from a stairwell, her face flushed with exertion and anger. She must have been in the building, alerted by her brother to the situation unfolding. "Stop right there," she shouted, moving to block their path to the nearest vehicles. Unlike her brother, she carried no visible weapon, but her determination was clear. "You've ruined everything," she spat at Zara. "Do you know how hard I worked to get where I am? 15 years of watching less qualified people get promoted ahead of me because of diversity quotas." The naked prejudice in her voice was shocking even after everything that had happened. "Then Thompson finally gives me the recognition I deserve, and you try to take it all away." "You assaulted a passenger," Amanda reminded her, holding up one of the recording devices. "You falsified reports and participated in a conspiracy to frame an innocent woman. That has nothing to do with your qualifications." Vanessa lunged for the recorder, engaging Amanda in a struggle for the device. In the chaos, the recorder activated, playing back one of the captured conversations at full volume. Thompson's voice echoed through the garage. Vanessa did exactly what was needed. These people need to be put in their place. Her slapping that woman was the best thing that could have happened, gives us the perfect opportunity to consolidate control. Following this came Vanessa's own voice. "I knew she didn't belong in first class the moment I saw her. These affirmative action types always try to play above their station. Slapping her felt good, actually." The explosive admissions continued to play as they struggled, capturing the attention of 2 security guards who had just entered the garage from another entrance. The guards, who weren't part of Derek's inner circle, stopped in their tracks, clearly disturbed by what they were hearing. Vanessa's face drained of color as she realized her own words were being broadcast to uninvolved witnesses. "Turn that off," she screamed, lunging again for the device. In her desperation, she failed to notice the approaching security guards, who had now heard enough to question the official narrative they'd been given. "Ms. Parker," one of the guards said hesitantly. "What's going on here?" That recording. Vanessa spun around, caught between her exposed lies and her need to maintain authority. "These people are trespassing and stealing company property. Detain them immediately." The guards looked uncertainly between Vanessa and the group, the recording having created enough doubt to make them hesitate. Reynolds seized the moment, producing his federal credentials. "I'm with the Federal Aviation Administration, conducting an investigation into regulatory violations and civil rights infractions. These individuals are cooperating witnesses under federal protection." It was a slight exaggeration of their current status, but delivered with enough authority to further confuse the guards. The momentary standoff was broken by the sound of approaching sirens. Reynolds' backup team, alerted when his communication suddenly went dark, had arrived at the building. Vanessa, realizing her position was deteriorating rapidly, made a final desperate attempt to grab the recording devices. In the struggle, she inadvertently pushed Amanda against a car, triggering its alarm and adding to the chaos. Reynolds restrained. Vanessa, as local police and federal agents began pouring into the garage, responding to both the building alarm and Reynolds' team's arrival. With Vanessa secured and the recording safely in federal custody, the immediate danger passed. Reynolds took Zara aside as the situation was brought under control. "We have enough to bring charges against Thompson, the Parkers, and several others involved in both the discrimination case and the safety violations, but we'll need your full cooperation and testimony." For the first time in weeks, Zara allowed herself to feel genuine hope. "You'll have it, but first there's someone we need to check on." Michael Chen remained in intensive care, but his condition had stabilized. The doctors had begun reducing his sedation, and there were encouraging signs of neurological response. Outside his room, Reynolds stationed federal agents to ensure his safety, a precaution that proved prescient when one of Thompson's associates attempted to gain access to Michael's room later that night, only to be detained by federal authorities. As Michael slowly regained consciousness over the following days, he revealed that he had managed to send copies of the backup drive to several secure locations before the attack. "I knew they might come after me," he explained weakly from his hospital bed. "So I sent encrypted copies to trusted contacts with instructions to release everything if I didn't check in regularly." While Zara focused on Michael's recovery and worked with federal investigators, Richard coordinated their legal strategy from his own hospital room, his arm still in a cast, but his determination undiminished. Thompson, realizing the extent of the evidence against him, attempted to flee the country, but was detained at a private airfield. The Parkers, lacking Thompson's resources, were arrested at their homes. Meanwhile, Claire Bennett, the journalist who had published the damaging articles about Zara, approached Richard with an unexpected proposal. After witnessing the arrests and hearing rumors about federal investigations, she had begun questioning her sources. Her own investigation had uncovered evidence that corroborated Zara's version of events. "I made a mistake," Bennett admitted when Zara finally agreed to meet her. "I took Thompson's sources at face value because of his position. I failed to apply the same scrutiny I would to other powerful figures." She offered to publish a comprehensive account of what had truly happened, but Zara had a different idea. "I'm calling an emergency board meeting," she told Richard and Marcus as they strategized in her temporary office. "With Thompson, Derek, and Vanessa all facing charges, the board will be in disarray. This is our moment to reclaim control." Thompson, believing his legal team could still salvage his position, returned to Skyline headquarters for what he thought would be a minor challenge to his authority. He had posted bail, confident that his connections would ultimately protect him from serious consequences. What he found instead was a boardroom filled with federal agents, the full board of directors, and Zara, officially reinstated as the legitimate owner after Marcus had exploited a legal loophole in Thompson's own takeover strategy. Reynolds presented the complete evidence of Thompson's corruption, including his approval of substandard aircraft parts in exchange for kickbacks. The recording of him discussing how diversity initiatives cut into the bottom line played for all to hear, along with his explicit instructions to target Zara because of her race. As federal agents escorted Thompson from the boardroom, he maintained his arrogance to the last. "People like me run things," he snarled at Zara. "Always have. Always will. You'll never truly be accepted in this world." Zara watched him go, his words revealing the true nature of their conflict. It had never really been about corporate control, but about who had the right to hold power in the first place. With Thompson removed, the board members who had supported him began making excuses for their involvement, claiming they had been misled or coerced. Zara listened to their explanations with outward calm, though inside she noted each person who had so quickly abandoned their principles when prejudice offered profit. The real work of reclaiming her company was just beginning, and she would remember who had stood where when it mattered most. What should have been a moment of triumph quickly revealed itself as merely the beginning of a longer, more frustrating battle. Thompson's arrest and Zara's reinstatement as the rightful owner of Skyline Airways represented significant victories, but the machinery of justice moved with exasperating slowness compared to the swift efficiency with which her life had been dismantled. Within 24 hours of his arrest, Thompson had assembled a legal dream team and secured his release on bail. The conditions were laughably lenient, a mere financial bond that represented pocket change to a man of his wealth, and travel restrictions that still allowed him complete freedom within the country. Vanessa and Derek Parker were similarly released, almost immediately, their combined bail less than the cost of the designer suit Thompson had worn to his arraignment. The justice system that had worked so quickly to process Zara on fabricated charges now seemed paralyzed by procedural hurdles when dealing with her adversaries. "The first court date isn't even scheduled until next month," Marcus explained during their strategy meeting in Zara's newly reclaimed office. Thompson's lawyers are already filing motions to dismiss, claiming the recordings were obtained illegally. Richard, his arms still in a cast, gestured to the stack of newspapers on Zara's desk. And have you seen the media coverage? A few buried paragraphs about Thompson's arrest, compared to the front-page stories they ran about you. He was right. The media outlets that had eagerly amplified Zara's supposed misdeeds now gave minimal attention to her vindication. Some framed the situation as a corporate leadership dispute rather than the criminal conspiracy it was. Others subtly implied that the federal charges might be overreaching. The public rehabilitation of Zara's reputation was proceeding at a glacial pace compared to its destruction. Meanwhile, Thompson's network of allies throughout the aviation industry began flexing their collective muscle. Major corporate clients suddenly canceled their contracts with Skyline Airways, citing uncertainty in leadership as their official reason. Fuel suppliers inexplicably found their delivery schedules disrupted, forcing last-minute flight cancellations. Industry associations that had previously celebrated Skyline's innovations now excluded the company from important trade events. It's a coordinated effort, Zara concluded after reviewing the mounting business challenges. They're sending a message: either return control to their kind or watch the company wither. The pressure extended to individuals as well. Employees who had supported Zara's return faced harassment and threats. Michael Chen, finally released from the hospital but still recovering, discovered his apartment had been vandalized with racial slurs. Amanda Wilson received anonymous messages detailing her daily movements, an unmistakable threat meant to silence her testimony. Even federal investigator Victor Reynolds encountered unusual resistance from within his own agency. His supervisors, previously supportive of the investigation, now questioned the allocation of resources to the case and suggested more pressing priorities. When Reynolds pushed back, citing the safety violations as justification for continued focus, he was temporarily reassigned to desk duty pending an administrative review. The aviation establishment was closing ranks, protecting one of their own against an outsider who had dared to challenge their authority. The FAA, despite Reynolds' evidence, moved with bureaucratic lethargy in addressing the safety concerns about Thompson's approved modifications. Inspections were scheduled and rescheduled, reports filed and returned for clarification, creating a paper trail of activity without actual progress. Within Skyline Airways itself, Zara discovered the depth of Thompson's influence. Key executives, who had enabled his takeover, remained in positions of power, subtly undermining her directives while maintaining a facade of cooperation. The board, though officially supportive of her reinstatement, dragged its feet on reversing Thompson's most damaging policy changes. "We need to consider the financial implications carefully," was the common refrain whenever she pushed to restore diversity initiatives or community investment programs. The legal challenges mounted daily. Thompson's lawyers filed motion after motion, each requiring a response that drained Zara's financial and emotional resources. His team exploited every procedural rule and technical loophole to delay meaningful court action, a strategy designed to exhaust rather than exonerate. Marcus discovered that the judge assigned to Thompson's criminal case was a former law school classmate of his brother-in-law, a connection that wasn't quite direct enough to force recusal, but certainly raised questions about impartiality. Richard, working through his industry contacts, uncovered a disturbing pattern of artificially inflated fuel prices being charged exclusively to Skyline Airways, with the difference flowing through shell companies connected to Thompson's associates. When these companies were confronted, they simply cited market fluctuations and supply chain issues before terminating discussions. The financial pressure intensified when major investors, citing governance concerns, began pulling out of previously committed funding rounds. Banks that had eagerly offered financing to Skyline just months earlier now found the company's debt ratio concerning and its future uncertain. Without this capital, the airline faced potential bankruptcy within days. Thompson's strategy was becoming clear. He and his allies would rather destroy Skyline Airways completely than allow Zara to succeed. In a moment of quiet desperation, Zara returned to O'Hare International Airport, to the very terminal where Vanessa had first slapped her and set these events in motion. She wasn't entirely sure why she felt compelled to revisit the scene, perhaps seeking closure, or perhaps hoping that distance from the crisis might offer clarity. As she sat in the first-class lounge, now properly recognized as the owner by staff who had been extensively briefed on her identity, she overheard a conversation between two flight attendants who hadn't noticed her presence. "Did you see that? Group in economy?" one whispered to the other. "So loud and demanding. I swear these people think they deserve special treatment just because of their skin color." "I know," the other replied. Vanessa knew how to handle them. It's a shame what happened to her. She just did what we all want to do sometimes. The casual racism, spoken so openly despite all that had transpired, hit Zara like a physical blow. This wasn't just about Thompson, Derek, and Vanessa. The problem was systemic, woven into the fabric of the industry she had tried to transform. All her work, all her policies and initiatives had merely papered over prejudices that remained, deeply entrenched. As she sat there, absorbing this painful reality, a strange sense of clarity emerged from her despair. She had been fighting the wrong battle trying to win in a system designed to exclude her. Perhaps it was time to change the rules of engagement entirely. Standing up, her mind racing with a new approach, Zara pulled out her phone and called Marcus. "I need you to arrange something unprecedented," she said, her voice steady with newfound purpose. "It's time to take this fight public in a way they won't expect." The Skyline Airways headquarters auditorium hadn't been designed for press conferences. It was meant for employee gatherings and training sessions, with understated corporate decor and modest audio-visual capabilities. But today, it was transformed, filled with journalists, cameras, industry analysts, and curious onlookers, all drawn by the unprecedented announcement that the mysterious owner of Skyline Airways would finally reveal herself to the public. Security was tight, with Richard personally vetting each attendee. The atmosphere buzzed with speculation. Most expected a choreographed corporate event, with carefully crafted messaging and limited substance. What they got instead was raw, unfiltered, truth that would send shockwaves through the entire industry. Zara Washington walked onto the stage alone, dressed not in expected executive attire, but in the same casual clothes she had worn on Flight 237 when Vanessa Parker slapped her. The symbolism wasn't lost on the assembled media. Without introduction or preamble, she began speaking, her voice clear and unwavering. "My name is Zara Washington. I founded Skyline Airways 15 years ago and have remained its majority owner despite recent attempts to erase that fact. Today, I'm breaking my long-standing anonymity to share a story that's much bigger than one airline or one incident." For the next hour, Zara methodically laid out her entire journey, beginning with her childhood in a working-class neighborhood in Chicago, where she discovered her gift for computer programming. She detailed her education at Harvard Business School, where she was often the only black woman in her classes. She recounted her early career experiences, the passed-over promotions, the stolen ideas, the constant need to be twice as good for half the recognition. "When I created the software that would eventually fund Skyline Airways, 3 different companies refused to believe I was the actual developer," she revealed. One executive insisted on speaking with the real programmer, despite my name being on every line of code. The audience was silent as she continued, describing how she had built Skyline Airways with a vision of truly inclusive service and workplace culture, and how she had chosen anonymity after experiencing how her race and gender became instant liabilities in executive settings. "I wanted the company to succeed based on its merits, not be undermined by prejudice against its founder." Then came the incident on Flight 237 and its aftermath. With methodical precision, Zara walked through each event, the slap, the detention, the false charges, the corporate conspiracy. As she spoke, screens behind her displayed evidence supporting each claim. Documents, photographs, and most damaging of all, the complete recordings of Thompson, Vanessa, and Derek planning their takeover and explicitly discussing their racist motivations. "I was told people like me don't belong in charge," Zara stated, her voice firm as Thompson's recorded voice repeated those exact words. "I was told the natural order needed to be restored. I was physically attacked, falsely imprisoned, and nearly killed because of the color of my skin and the power I held." The journalists who had initially appeared skeptical were now frantically taking notes or staring open-mouthed at the evidence unfolding before them. Zara continued, announcing a complete restructuring of Skyline Airways focused on accountability and inclusion. Starting today, every Skyline flight will have cameras recording all crew interactions with passengers, with footage regularly reviewed by an independent oversight board. An anonymous reporting system will allow employees and customers to flag discriminatory treatment without fear of retaliation. She detailed new hiring and promotion practices designed to identify and eliminate bias, and the establishment of a foundation dedicated to supporting minorities in aviation, funded by a significant portion of her personal wealth. This isn't just about changing policies, she emphasized. It's about changing culture, and culture only changes when behavior has consequences and success has new models to follow. As she concluded her presentation, Zara addressed the attempts to destroy her and her company directly. To those who thought they could erase me, who believed their connections and privileges would shield them from accountability, I have one message. I am still here, and I am not alone. At this cue, Michael Chen, still bearing visible injuries from the attack but standing tall, joined her on stage. One by one, other allies followed Richard with his arm in a cast, Marcus with legal documents, Amanda Wilson carrying the recording devices, and Victor Reynolds representing the federal investigation. Most powerful of all were the dozen employees and former employees who took their places on stage, people who had witnessed discrimination at Skyline and elsewhere, but had previously been afraid to speak out. The sight of this diverse group standing together in solidarity created an indelible image that would lead news broadcasts for days. The press conference concluded with Zara taking questions directly, refusing the corporate practice of screening inquiries in advance. She answered each with remarkable candor, neither downplaying the challenges ahead nor exaggerating the progress already made. When Claire Bennett, the journalist who had written the initial hit pieces, stood to ask a question, a hush fell over the room. "Ms. Washington," Bennett began, her usual confidence noticeably diminished. "I contributed to the narrative that undermined your credibility and ownership. My question is twofold. How do you respond to media that participated in your character assassination, and what can we as journalists do better in similar situations?" Zara's response was measured but unflinching. The media reflects the biases of the society it serves, but it also has the power to challenge those biases. I don't expect perfect reporting, but I do expect journalists to question why they might find a black woman's claim to ownership inherently less credible than a white man's claim to deserving that ownership. The impact of Zara's public revelation was immediate and far-reaching. I believe Zara began trending across social media platforms. Former employees came forward with their own stories of discrimination under Thompson's brief leadership, creating a cascade of testimonials that could not be dismissed as isolated incidents. Claire Bennett, seeking professional redemption, published a comprehensive investigative piece corroborating everything Zara had presented, adding new details about Thompson's network of influence throughout the industry. With public attention focused intensely on the case, the justice system found its previous delays suddenly untenable. Court dates were moved up, motions to dismiss were denied, and Thompson's bail conditions were tightened after evidence emerged of his attempts to intimidate witnesses. Michael, sufficiently recovered to provide testimony, presented the recovered backup documentation that conclusively proved Zara's ownership from the company's inception. The most surprising development came from the public itself. In a spontaneous show of support, people began booking Skyline Airways flights in record numbers, explicitly citing their desire to support Zara's stand against discrimination. The financial pressure orchestrated by Thompson's allies became irrelevant in the face of this unanticipated consumer response. Business clients who had canceled contracts quietly sought to renew them, not wanting to be on the wrong side of public sentiment. Fuel suppliers suddenly found their delivery schedules normalized. Industry associations hastily issued statements affirming their commitment to diversity and inclusion. Thompson's other business interests began suffering as scrutiny spread beyond Skyline Airways. Investors pulled out of his ventures, partners distanced themselves, and former allies denied any knowledge of his actions. Derek and Vanessa Parker, lacking Thompson's resources and connections, found themselves facing both criminal charges and civil lawsuits without significant legal protection. Their attempts to negotiate plea deals were complicated by the overwhelming evidence against them and the public attention on the case. 6 months after her public revelation, Zara stood in the remodeled training center at Skyline headquarters, addressing the largest and most diverse class of flight attendants in the company's history. Among them was Jessica, the whistleblower, who had tried to help Zara in the beginning. After the public exposure of Thompson's conspiracy, Jessica had contacted Zara again, free from the NDA that had been invalidated due to its connection to criminal activity. Zara had immediately offered her a position as a trainer, recognizing both her courage and her commitment to proper treatment of all passengers. "Your training here is about more than service," Zara told the attentive class. "It's about dignity. Every passenger who boards our aircraft deserves respect, regardless of their appearance, accent, or seat assignment. That's not just company policy, it's fundamental human decency." The changes at Skyline Airways had become a case study in corporate transformation. The Independent Oversight Board for Discrimination Complaints was now being adopted by other airlines, facing similar issues. The cameras recording crew interactions had resulted in a marked decrease in complaints and an increase in positive customer feedback. Most significantly, the company's financial performance had strengthened, definitively disproving Thompson's claim that diversity initiatives cut into the bottom line. Beyond the company itself, Zara had emerged as a reluctant but powerful voice on corporate responsibility and systemic racism. Her foundation supporting minorities in aviation had already provided scholarships to over 100 students and mentorship to dozens of professionals facing barriers similar to those she had encountered. Despite these successes, Zara remained clear-eyed about the work still to be done. Thompson's criminal case continued to move through the courts, with his legal team employing every delay tactic available. Some of his allies remained in positions of influence throughout the industry, and while the most overt forms of discrimination had become more difficult to practice, the underlying attitudes that had enabled them persisted in more subtle forms. On a clear autumn morning, Zara boarded one of her own planes for a routine flight to New York. As she settled into her first-class seat, now traveling openly as the recognized owner, she observed the crew and their interactions with passengers, with professional interest. The changes were evident: more diverse staff, more attentive service to all passengers, a noticeable absence of the differential treatment she had documented during her undercover assessment. As the boarding process continued, a well-heeled businessman entered first class and, mistaking Zara for a flight attendant despite her expensive suit and lack of uniform, casually asked for a pre-flight drink. Years earlier, such an assumption might have triggered anger or resignation. Today, Zara simply smiled and said, "I'm actually the owner of Skyline Airways, but I'd be happy to introduce you to our excellent cabin crew who'll take care of that for you." The man's embarrassment was evident, but Zara extended her hand in greeting. "Zara Washington, it's a pleasure to have you flying with us today." His surprise quickly gave way to respect as recognition dawned. "The Zara Washington? I've read about what you've built here. It's impressive." "Thank you," she replied. "But it's not about what I've built. It's about creating space for everyone to contribute their best. That's how real progress happens." As the plane accelerated down the runway, lifting into the clear, blue sky, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The path had been more difficult than she could have ever imagined, filled with obstacles deliberately placed to make her fail. But in facing them, in refusing to be erased or diminished, she had created not just a more equitable company, but a model for change that others could follow. The slap that was meant to put her in her place had instead revealed her true power, the courage to stand firm against a system designed to exclude her, and the vision to transform that system from within. The airline she had built was no longer just a business. It had become a statement that people like her did indeed belong, anywhere their talents and determination could take them. And that was a truth no one could ever take away. Zara Washington's story teaches us powerful lessons about systemic racism and the courage required to fight it. First, discrimination often hides in plain sight, protected by systems designed to maintain existing power structures. Zara's journey reveals how quickly institutions, from airlines to law enforcement to the media, can align against those who challenge the status quo, especially when the challenger is a person of color. Second, true change requires both personal resilience and strategic thinking. Zara succeeded not just because of her determination, but because she gathered evidence, built alliances, and ultimately changed the rules of engagement. She recognized when fighting within the system wasn't enough and boldly took her case directly to the public. Third, anonymity can be both protection and vulnerability. While hiding her identity initially shielded Zara from prejudice, it ultimately created the conditions for her erasure. Her most powerful moment came when she stood publicly in her truth, connecting her personal experience to the larger struggle for equality. Fourth, meaningful change must be structural, not symbolic. Zara didn't just reclaim her position, she implemented concrete accountability measures like recording crew interactions and creating independent oversight boards. She understood that policies without enforcement mechanisms are merely aspirational. Finally, this story reminds us that progress isn't a single victory, but an ongoing commitment. Even after exposing Thompson's conspiracy, Zara recognized that changing deeply ingrained attitudes would require sustained effort. The systems that enabled her mistreatment existed before Thompson and would persist after him unless deliberately dismantled. The ultimate lesson is that fighting discrimination isn't just about personal vindication. It's about creating spaces where everyone can contribute their talents without barriers of prejudice. Call to action. What would you have done in Zara's position? Would you have revealed your identity immediately after the slap, or followed her strategic approach of documenting the full extent of discrimination? Comment below with what you think took the most courage in Zara's journey. I'd love to hear your perspective. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination and felt powerless to address it? This story shows that documentation, allies, and strategic thinking can make a difference even against powerful opponents. If this message resonated with you, please hit the like button to help this story reach others who need to hear it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that expose injustice and celebrate those fighting to create a more equitable world. Share this video with someone who might need encouragement in their own struggle against discrimination. Thank you for joining me for this journey. Remember Zara's example. Sometimes the moments designed to put you in your place become the catalyst for showing your true power.